I understand that you started at Johnson & Wales as a communications officer after graduating with an English degree, plus you've worked as an adjunct professor for communications. So I'm just curious, how has your communications background influenced the work that you do now?
It influences everything, actually. I think that it's been a benefit more than not, and I'm happy to share a few ways that it has benefited me.
Sure.
I will say that the industry has significantly changed, of course, since I graduated from college, and it's much different today than it was in 1988. But I think everything that I do, I think about how it's going to be communicated to the campus community and the external community, if that's appropriate. And I find within, I guess, the past 5 years, or at least since I came into the Providence campus president and COO position, that I actively talk about a communications plan. And I think effective communications can really determine whether or not an initiative, whether it's strategic or routine, will be successful or not.
So given your extensive experience at Johnson & Wales University, could you describe your career trajectory and why you've connected so deeply with this particular institution?
I started my job search by reaching out to colleges and universities, and Johnson & Wales was the first one that hired me.
Oh, wow.
And, I really don't think that was an accident. Johnson & Wales students, as you're probably aware, tend to have affordability struggles. They tend to be students who do particularly well at finding their way. They're known by industry as hard workers, as students who really made things happen for themselves. So I connect with them in the perspective that I know what it takes to get through school. I know it's not just about studying, but about managing the affordability piece. And in particular, I know what it's like to graduate and say, what am I going to do with myself? And so many things at the university are about how you apply your major outside the classroom, whether it's in experiential education through internships and study abroad opportunities, or it's simply by the work that we do in a club or an organization that might relate to our major. So that's been a connection that's been pretty strong for me, and has really allowed me to remain connected to our particular students.
And would you say that experiential education piece is one of Johnson & Wales, competitive advantages?
Experiential education was something that Johnson & Wales was doing long before it was fashionable. And was certainly something that came through for me in my early years at Johnson & Wales. The experiential education, the affordability work that we do is tremendous as well. I think Johnson & Wales is also filled with opportunity. I started at a small branch campus and would never have had the opportunity to learn so many different areas at any university had I not been at a small operation. So I had the best of both worlds, right? I mean, I was at this small campus, or we thought it was small, 1,600 students, which is larger than some single universities today. But it allowed me to gain knowledge and a working background of many different areas as I continued to pursue my education. And then being connected to a main campus like what we had in Providence, Rhode Island, also exposed me to what it was like to run a larger university.
And so I was reading about the transition when Charleston and the Norfolk campuses consolidated and resulted in a move to Charlotte. How did you handle that significant time in Johnson & Wales history?
Well, I tend to be pretty good at separating emotion from business matters. I probably saw more tears and more personal challenges than I'd ever seen. And it became even more important for me to connect with employees emotionally, but detach from them when business decisions had to be made. So there were a lot of moving parts in that transition, and there was a very strong support network through our Human Resources Office in Rhode Island and, other transitional support that we can engage with in terms of counseling for employees, the financial transition and all those things. It's just one of those decisions that was right for the university, and for some individuals it was very difficult.
And then so once you made the move to Providence, what were some of the challenges you faced in your roles there, either as Senior Vice President of Regional Campus or, eventually as President and CEO?
Well, the regional job was a new position at the university, and so that brought about some discomfort because our branches had been able to work separately from the system, and that was putting us at risk in many different areas, primarily in terms of compliance, regulation, legal matters, things of that nature. And so I was implementing some framework around areas that had been a free-for-all.
And I was reading a little bit about some changes to the admission rate and enrollment, and I'm just wondering, how is enrollment being handled today given the incredible shifts that we're seeing in higher education, particularly that of students needing to see kind of that immediate return on investment for their degrees that I know they and their parents are seeking?
Yeah, well, the outside factors have been tremendous for us and have changed everything. So, what the media is saying about us, what the media is saying, not about Johnson & Wales in particular, but
Sure.
higher ed in total, has been more damaging than positive. The talks of free tuition have impacted us. The declining high school market has not been good to us. The challenges specific to culinary education have really hit us hard. So there are multiple factors that have negatively impacted us. In addition to the fact that the way we recruit today is vastly different from the way we recruited 10 years ago.
Sure.
We didn't have social media, well, maybe more than 10 years ago, but, social media has changed. Access to high school students in the classroom has changed. Just the whole experience has become so much more complicated. Data is much more available than it used to be, and we are able to use hard data that we generate and that others generate for us to really drive not only who we recruit, but how we recruit and where. And that was a difficult change for the university. It still is for the university to embrace, and we aren't nearly where we should be. We're right now actually recruiting for a vice president of enrollment management. The characteristics of that individual are completely different from those of our prior enrollment management VP. And we're really looking for someone who really understands more about the data, and that's something that I have pushed since I took the Providence campus role in 2011. So, certainly I wasn't a lone decision maker, so it took me a long time to get that transition through and to motivate individuals to make better decisions by making decisions in a different way.
And that's kind of related to my next question, shifting gears a bit to talk about strategic planning and your involvement there. So I read you've obviously played a significant role in several of the iterations from Focus 2011 to the latest strategic plan that was recently launched. What do you see as your role in strategic planning, and how do you handle that kind of change management piece that we've talked about?
Well, fortunately for me, I have been on the strategic planning team since 2006. So, it hasn't been like jumping off the cliff.
Sure.
I would say. but my background is heavy in operations. I have been an extremely detailed individual, and I'm the kind of individual that would have mapped like every single step of the registration process. I can't do that anymore, and that's because I have to focus on the more strategic initiatives and try to anticipate what's coming in higher education and what challenges will be and how the university needs to change to meet those challenges. So, I think one of the most important things that we can do to prepare for leadership positions is to understand how to think more strategically. Something that's been very helpful for me is, first of all, to understand how my own organization does it and experience or learn about how other organizations do it and compare that with what you see in accreditation standards. Many higher ed institutions don't do that well. They make strategic plans and they put them on a bookshelf and they check in once every 6 months or once every year. And we have been an organization that has done that in the past, and it wasn't nearly as successful for us as it is to continually focus on what our strategies are.
Sure.
And institutions can't afford to focus on anything but their strategies anymore.
And then when it comes time to assess performance of the strategic plan, what are some indicators of success, either specifically for the Johnson & Wales 2022 strategic plan or in general? How would you deem performance?
Well, the overall strategic measures would be retention rates, graduation rates, would be academic portfolio and our enrollments and performance within those. Of our financial performance, certainly endowment is our endowment success is a performance. Fundraising is a performance measure. Bond ratings, we currently have ratings by Standard & Poor's and Moody's, although both have given the higher ed industry a downgrade in the past year just as a result of the landscape across the board. But, that's certainly a measure. Employee turnover is, both the measure is positive and negative, right? I mean, you want some degree of turnover.
Sure.
I'd say those are the primary ones. And then, your strategies your tactical activities that fall under your strategies, those tend to be, did it happen or not?
Sure.
Kind of thing. But it all feeds up into the mission and how well you're really performing as an institution.
And then shifting to your upcoming role here, what are some of your goals and aspirations as Chancellor of Johnson & Wales University?
Well, the university, in terms of overall performance, I would say has been on a downward trend because of some of the impacts outside the university, and I think inside the university we can always improve. So we have to get enrollment turned around, and that'll be a part of our strategies moving forward. We have to analyze the operations at all of our campuses and really create work that specifically supports each branch, and that may be different kinds of work, but yet within the framework of those compliance factors and risk factors. We have to incorporate data more into our work and use it in a meaningful way, and we really have to leverage our academic opportunities, and those include increasing excellence across our faculty. It includes the establishment of a faculty institute, professional development funds in support of faculty. We have some diversity efforts that we're engaging in to improve the diversity at the university, although it's difficult when you don't have a lot of hiring opportunities. We just have to make these things move, and our current task in front of us is to ensure that we are organized as a university to meet those needs.
So I'm just wondering, you touched on this a bit, but what advice you have for someone like me who's striving to move into senior leadership one day and continue growing in higher education?
Well, a couple things, I think. First of all, you have to figure out the life balance. Because you can't do this kind of work long term if you can't figure that out. And then I think throughout my 29 years, I have not been afraid to take anything on. I've always raised my hand for things, even when I had no clue, how I was going to accomplish it. And, that just, it forced me to do research. It forced me to learn new things. And I think that's the way I'm wired. Sometimes you just, find an opportunity and you take it. And I guess that's what I've done a few times.
That's a good takeaway. Say yes to the opportunities.
Yeah.